situations, and basically you just make it more clear that if you have something that's non-conforming, you can maintain it without going through a song and dance, so to speak.
Yes, because the 50% can be destroyed into 50% is harsh in some repair situations. No one's replacing a deck in 3 parts.
Yeah.
But then if they are destroying more than 50% of it at a time.
Now, would this is just ordinary maintenance. So, if you got a deck that's non-conforming and it gets taken out by a tree, would that it wouldn't be able to be replaced then, right?
Correct. It would go.
I see the biggest issue is decks and freestanding garages. The same thing, you got a garage that's too close to the property line or too large or something, and then the tree falls on it. You know, and you replace the roof, but the walls stay in place. Is that considered? What's 50%? 50% of what?
I think it's measured at the value of the structure. So, would we look at what the value of the garage was, and then what's the value of the garage with a big hole in the roof, and see if how they compare?
Could be, but I've had staff members talk about two walls and two walls, physical structure. So not necessarily the cost potentially, but also physically, are you doing more than two walls of the four walls? Then you go over the number.
But isn't the whole point of this is trying to protect the neighbors? So if that facility was already there and the roof was damaged and you go to fix the roof, it's not like you're bringing in a new building. I mean, it's already been there. So we're trying to protect the neighbors, but to what extent are we limiting the property owners?
So you got here's a situation. You got a footings, foundations, garage floor in place. High winds or tornadoes damages it down to the floor and foundation walls. You come in to get a building permit to basically reconstruct your non-conforming garage. We tell them, no, you can't. What are they going to do? Well, all right, I'll just leave my footings and foundations exposed, and it'll be an eyesore in town.
Yeah, that's not good.
Well, I think one of the overall guiding principles that the staff has been looking at for so many years is that we want to try to eliminate a non-conforming structure when applicable. Is that possible? And bring it into compliance in today's zoning regulations, even though it may have been allowed in 1970.
And I think that's okay, but sometimes people don't have the means to do that either. So I think we need to give a little grace there.
And we've seen situations where lots are so packed in, and so it's obviously one thing if somebody was trying to rebuild the house and everything on that lot, but I know there's at least one situation here where I think in our discussion, we couldn't even, I don't think a certain property would have been allowed a deck at all based on the way it was built. And so I understand why bringing things into compliance is the ultimate goal, but I also don't want to punish property owners that purchased or even have lived in for a long time and something that's either for one reason or another was built a certain way, whether it was allowed by code precisely or enforcement was different at some point in history or whatever it was. And so if language like this helps kind of bring that maintenance question above the table a little bit and makes it more clear, I don't think it's a bad thing, as long as I could agree that the language would limit it and not, obviously not allow it to be increased, and then and you'd still have that issue. I don't think this is designed to fix that issue where, yeah, an act of God or something could render that gone, and I guess, I don't think that can be remedied by this, but I do think this could help and make something more clear.
Yeah, as I read this, this provides some leniency, more leniency, I guess, than what we have in the code. Now, are we gonna be able to fix some of these conditions that we talked about? Maybe, maybe not. But I think this helps for the most part, provide some clarity to it, so I'm good with it.
Is there anything other than roofing, siding, windows, decks, and repaving of existing paved areas that you would like explicitly included? Brian had mentioned a garage. Is there any language we should have in there addressing non-conforming garages? I'm just trying to make sure we are thorough while we're on the subject.
I guess, one thing you could maybe consider is, a lot of these things we talk about here are I'll call it cosmetic, siding, roofing materials, and that kind of stuff, windows. I guess what we don't talk about is ordinary repairs when it comes to the structure, especially on decks, deck boards, beams, roof trusses, and things like that. At what point does that become a rebuild versus maintenance?
Well, specifically talking about decks, I get calls all the time during the summertime. Somebody will say, I just want to replace my floorboards, or maybe my guardrail, but the understructure's fine. But in case it isn't, what do we do then? So I'll say, well, the first part, if you just keep it to replacing a few bad boards, repair and maintenance, no permit. If you rip them all down and you got bad ledger boards, bad beams, joists, whatever, then come get a permit because you're talking about structural stuff and maybe even redo the stair rises and guardrails. I mean, everything to do with the deck, there's codes to it. So we want to not get the $35 for the permit fee, but to get the building inspector out there to take a look to make sure that it's being rebuilt to the current code. There's a threshold where we say that little bit of replacing a few boards, repair and maintenance, don't come see me. But if it's a structural thing, then let's get a permit for it.
So would you say, Paul, that this language saying normal repairs and maintenance would help? I mean, it's still a judgment, I guess, but it's something that would be, you'd be able to navigate.
So say the under part of the beams and the support and everything of the deck it was built in the 60s and it is now rotted away. So these repairs are necessary to make it safe.
Right.
Would-
With just one building permit, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Would we consider them replacing it to make it safe, ordinary repairs and maintenance, or is that a replacement of the deck that they are eliminating the non-conforming use? I don't want someone to unintentionally lose their deck when they're just trying to. I don't want to walk out there and fall to my doom.
Yeah, and I understand that, yeah, we don't want non-conforming, but to make it smaller, I don't think that's fair to them, that they've lived with this all that time. And that's the way they bought the house. Now, if they deliberately went and built it too big, then yeah. But if they've been living with it, I don't think that's fair to cut it back just to make it conforming. Personally, I'd be really mad about that.
Yeah, I think the ones that have come to us, they either wanna make it bigger, or in some of the decks, they wanna put a covered deck over it. But I don't think too many have come to us where they just simply wanna replace it. Do you see a lot of that, where they wanna replace something that's non-conforming? Decks
Well,
in particular?
within the staff level, we've agreed to do that multiple permit deal to get around the non-conforming piece. But it's sort of a gray area with the staff members, not everybody's on the same page. We know it has to be replaced, you know, as Barb said, you don't want to have somebody that has a deck that's in disrepair, it could be dangerous. So we have not brought those two deck permit non-conforming to this board. We've handled it in-house.
Would it simplify it if we, redoing the structure on a garage or a house or a shed or something like that, that's one thing, but what if we said, you can replace a deck as long as it doesn't make the current non-conforming component worse than what it is now. So if you're encroaching a foot, you can encroach a foot, but you can't, and it's only 10 feet long, one foot into the encroachment, but you can't go 20 foot long, 1 foot into the encroachment. I think decks are probably the biggest issue, right, Paul? I'm guessing. So if we could maybe specifically say something about decks, replacing them.
We had that one, remember that one?
I agree, trying to do it, 35, 35, 35. I mean, we're just playing games and making it longer and more painful and more expensive. I mean, we're getting the same result. It's just, why go through the hoops? Let's do it right if we're gonna allow it to happen.
Well, and it doesn't give government a very good face when we do something like that with the citizens. I mean, we don't need to make it as, I know you're not trying to, but we don't need to make it any more difficult than it has to be. They don't like us anyway.
And I think the first part of this in F kind of already covers, unless that's not specific enough, in no event may any repair or maintenance result in an expansion of any existing nonconformity.
Well, if that would help make your job easier, because I'm sure you're the one that said take all the brunt of the abuse.
It's both, it's the building staff, Melissa and I both confront that when somebody comes up to our desk and they want to do the right thing is to replace that deck that needs to be replaced. And as a building official, we want to have a safe community.
All right, I think this is the last one. So we're getting there. So this one is the longest one. So building permits are interesting. So right now we allow you issue a building permit is good for a year. I can extend it if you show that circumstances beyond your control prevented you from finishing your project in that time. So what happens then is some people do, some people don't. They half finish a project and it stays. Sometimes they get a building permit to finish it. Other times it just stays half completed forever. Paul can probably cite some examples around town. So what this adds is when a building permit expires and after a certain amount of time, the project then is deemed abandoned. Whether 365 days is too long from the date the permit expires or not, I will leave that up to you how long you think is too long for us to consider that they're not coming back to finish this. So then there's ways to modify the permit so long as you don't significantly expand the scope. You can't come in and say I'm just replacing windows and then finish a whole room and pay the window fee. Then suspension or revocation, there could be circumstances where an app is submitted and there are incorrect things about it, or they do something not in compliance with federal, state, or local law, and so this gives us an avenue to suspend or revoke a license. Then it talks about after a certain amount of time, we can either accept their evidence that they have cured whatever defect and they can get started, or if it's so bad, we can revoke it. But the big thing is after a certain amount of time, on the last page, 1519.5, what's the ultimate effect of suspension or revocation or abandonment, I guess, as well, would be ultimately you're given 90 days to restore the site to its pre-startup construction condition. So you just don't have those projects that have existed for 10 years in a half completed state that, oh, of course we hear, oh yeah, I'm going to get to that, I'm going to get to that, and it's been 10 years and you haven't. And now you have an unsafe structure sitting there. So that's kind of what we're looking to do as a mechanism so we can get rid of those half completed things that never seem to get any better, rather than a building permit expires and it just sits. And then a couple of years down the road, maybe they'll pull another one, so then they get a year. They do some, maybe not so much. Then it sits, then they get another one a couple of years later. We're just looking for some ways to get rid of those things. And I get it. People get busy. I'm sure I probably have 40 projects at home that I probably have completed, but everyone gets busy.
Do you run into any issues on commercial projects beyond 365 days? I mean, a lot of them are like 18 months.
Well, certainly the schools would go over the 1 year.
Okay.
And so, do they formally come and ask for the extra 6 month extension? If they did, we'd grant it to them, so, those kind of projects we would go over the 1 year. But generally speaking, other than a master project like that, I've not seen that in Brandon, we go over a year. And we had that house in Sioux Falls on the southern side of town that was never finished. It was a court case. We haven't had that, but with us being a bigger community, possibly that could occur here. It hasn't. It never does. But that was a big litigation issue. So.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to defer to you guys if you think, I mean, you deal with this every day, so if you think this is the appropriate language to make life easier for you and the city's customers.
There's a case we're working with Ms. Marceau as the city attorney, but it's rare that she gets involved in these type of issues, but she is helping us with one case to move the ball forward. So.
Remember when we had that thing behind McDonald's that, was it a mobile home, that guy that had the mess in the yard, and that was tough to get that dealt with. So if this makes it easier for you, yeah. Anybody have any comments on this one then? Or good? However you want to write it, basically. Okay. You got anything else?
One thing I wanted to highlight in D, on I guess would be page 40 of the packet. Right now, the language is no more than 2 active building permits are allowed on a residentially zoned lot at a time. My proposal is to change residentially zoned to R1, just because residentially zoned is very broad. Where R1s are more of your smaller things, whereas you could have an entire, just take Aspen Ridge, all those apartments are on one lot, and each is a building permit. So,
Yeah, I was thinking of that as well, because I mean, as we get more apartments in town and they become occupied, I mean, you can't renovate the whole building at once. You can go in and work in one unit in between tenants and then another unit between tenants. So you could have, like you said, 4 or 5 projects, even within one building going on at the same time.
Okay, anything else for the good of the cause? If not, good discussion. If not, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And motion second to adjourn, all in favor? Great. Thank you, everyone.
We are adjourned at 8:23 p.m.